Welcome to this episode of the 14 Podcast. A good buddy of mine in the business, Jay Tate, joins me, otherwise known as Trophy Husband for those of you watching in video. Jay, thanks for joining us on a busy time for you.
It's a pleasure being here with you, sir, who I consider the greatest expert on all Vandy sports and history.
Yeah, that's not a distinguished designation, but we'll take what we can get these days.
Sure.
Let's talk Auburn, though.
Yeah.
This game with Ole Miss, I think, is a fascinating one. What's the feeling around the fan base and the program about this game? How does it change with the win or a loss?
Yeah, so the team, I think the general thought is that the team's getting better coaching than they've gotten in a long time, and I think the Auburn people in general are pretty fired up about that. The coach, Brian Harsin, is definitely an alpha dog, unlike the previous coach who was kind of wishy-washy all the time, so I think they appreciate that as well. The team's getting better. Every team gets better through the course of the season. One could argue that Vanderbilt's maybe not following that trajectory quite as much, but most of the time the teams get better. I just think that Auburn's getting a little bit better than average. They're getting better quickly, and they had some issues for sure about a month ago, but it seems like the quarterback, Bo Nix, has gotten a little bit better, and I think expectations are kind of on the up. Part of the thing when you're an Auburn fan or you're over at Auburn, you kind of have these teams that you worry about, and then you have these teams that you don't worry about. And typically, Ole Miss is not a team that Auburn's very worried about. And to me, that's a little bit of an issue just for the fan base, because I think the fan base assumes, for the most part, that Auburn's going to beat Ole Miss this weekend. And I think that can happen. I don't think the coaching staff or the players are looking at it that way because they're kind of paid not to. But, I think the fans almost kind of assume over here that it's going to be, maybe not a walk in the park. Well, it's not going to be a walk in the park, but they're expecting a W. And anything short of that is going to be very problematic. I happen to think Ole Miss is a pretty good ball club. Certainly going to put some points on the board. And I think the over-under on this game is 66. So Vegas is expecting a shootout. And, Auburn's offense, I don't know if they can keep up in a 66-point game. That's the thing. That's my only question.
Well, let's talk the defense first, because they're playing maybe the best player of the league in Matt Corral. Ole Miss's offense is fun to watch. They play fast. Sorry, I had it on mute there. Ole Miss's offense, fun to watch, led by Matt Corral, who's tremendous. And you can't look at Auburn's schedule and say they played a lot of teams like that. I guess the closest would be Arkansas, mobile quarterback there. Auburn handled that game pretty well. Again, not an exact comparison, but that's the closest they've been. Anything that you can apply from that Arkansas game to take forward into maybe how Auburn might match up in this one?
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me about that game was just the very sharp play design and sequencing on behalf of the offensive staff, which is led by Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator. I just thought that, again, the play calling was really, really good in that game. And that's the second game where we've seen Bo Nix be just more calm. He's a guy that likes to run and create things kind of in open space. I think a lot of us, certainly me included, believe that he does that too much. And I think that Bobo has been trying to calm him down a little bit and say, hey, man, it's cool for you to escape and run away when when the situation demands you do that. But in situations where you can stay sound in the pocket, maybe step up a little bit and throw the ball with more authority, that's better. And so we saw that in the Arkansas game. So to me, I think that's the start of a trend. He's a junior now. He's learned. I am narrating this in my head. He's learned from his mistakes of the past, and he's going to be a more stable, predictable quarterback. We definitely saw that in the Arkansas game. We saw that to some degree in the LSU game. And so my thought is that in this game against Ole Miss, he's going to be able to do the same thing. The Rebels, the way that they do things on defense is they take a lot of risks on first down, trying to get a negative play and pushing people behind the chains, which is a great idea. If they don't get that, then the other team kind of has a little bit of an advantage. So I want to see the way that Bo executes specifically on first down. He's going to be pressured, and that's going to be the hardest test for him, is being calm on those first downs when they're bringing 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever. He's got to make a thoughtful, careful decision without getting panicky. That's going to be a big deal.
That's interesting to hear your take on this, because we talked before the Penn State game, and you were singing a little different tune on Bo Nix. What has changed as you've seen him mature in his career? I know you hit on some of that then, but where was the moment that maybe your opinion shifted on him a bit?
He made some throws in that LSU game that I thought were more mature for him. Now, he also had a great play, one of the truly all-time great plays I've ever seen, where he eluded like 4 would-be tacklers in the backfield and made a really long throw to a tight end for a touchdown. which is the single best play we've seen this year, and as good a play as I've ever seen outside of like a kick six or whatever. So, I mean, you're saying, JG, what, you saw a more mature guy in the LSU game. He made that great scrambling play. Yeah, but he made a lot of other throws in that game that I thought were really mature for him, where he stood in the pocket. And I know the temptation is there for him to run all the time. And then to me, the Arkansas game was kind of his piece de resistance, man. I mean, because he did that the whole game. I don't think he had one single panicky situation in that game. And, Arkansas didn't push him as much as, say, Georgia did. But Arkansas's defensive front, they're solid.
Mm-hmm.
And they created some problems, and he just kind of shoved it aside and made the right play. So to me, he's come a long way since that Penn State game where I thought he was just so-so. He's gotten a lot better. And even the people that don't like Bo, and there's a lot of them, particularly on our board, have to kind of acknowledge the fact that he's been playing better football lately. And I think everybody's encouraged.
Well, the other thing that did not help him was their receiver situation. They fired their receivers coach weeks ago. How has that gotten better, if it has, since that change was made?
Yeah, that was kind of a weird deal. I mean, you don't normally see a coach get fired in September strictly for performance, which I know is what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
There was no shadiness behind the scenes at all, and he wasn't accused of it, and I know he didn't do it. So it just wasn't a good culture fit, and as you mentioned, the wideouts were not playing well. Interestingly, the first week after he was fired, they played their worst game. I don't know how many drops they had in that game against Georgia. That game ended up being 34-10. I'm telling you, if you play it again, I mean, Auburn loses that game because Georgia's a better football team, but it ain't 34-10. And they dropped, by my count, 13 balls in that game, which is incredible. They only had like 22 drops last year. So they've gotten a little bit better from that point. You had to get better from that point. I still think they're lacking star power. There is one significant change this week, and I really like it. They're taking one of their freshman tight ends, or their freshman tight end, I should say, Landon King. He's 6'4". I love this kid. I love what he can do as a pass catcher. He's been getting more and more snaps as the season's gone on. I think he had 3 catches against Arkansas, and he's just this huge target. He reminds me of Darren Waller, if you watch the NFL from the Raiders, and they're going to move him to wide out. He's going to be like a big slot in this game coming up, and I think they're going to groom him in that direction. The plan is for him to be a tight end down the road, but at this point, they're just looking for guys that can catch the football. Mm-hmm. He has shown that he can do that and think along with the quarterback in the context of the defense around him. So I'm looking forward to seeing him, and I think if you're just kind of a casual watching this game, you should look for him too. He's number 40, and I think he's going to be an absolute stud in this league, let's say next year and the year after that.
What's going on with Tank Bigsby? Because the numbers haven't been great. I've heard the finger pointed other places besides him. I don't know if that's fair or not. You're closer to it than I am. Sometimes the blocking's been an issue, maybe the play selection, whatever. But I think we all expected like a first-team All-SEC year out of him. He was arguably the best running back in the league coming in. So to see him where he is kind of astonishing to me.
Yeah, the numbers aren't there. To me, he doesn't look quite as explosive. But I don't have anything else to tell you about him. I think he's working hard. I think he's running aggressively the way that he did last year. I think the blocking's been poor. Auburn's run blocking has been very, very bad. If you look at PFF, they're one of the worst in the country, really, and definitely one of the worst in the SEC. It's an offensive line that's much better at pass pro, and I think they're just trying to be realistic about, okay, our line is the problem. I'm thinking about it from Bobo's perspective. Our line is the problem. What can we do to mitigate that weakness? Well, we can't make it any better because we don't have better players right now. So let's just play to their strengths. And when he does that, that means they throw the ball more, and it de-accentuates Tank. Part of the problem with Tank is that Jarquez Hunter, the freshman tailback number 27, has been insanely good. I had no idea this kid was going to be as good. He was a 3-star guy out of Philadelphia, Mississippi. If Mississippi State ever pays even a little bit of attention to him, he goes there, but they never did. And so Auburn kind of snagged him just kind of for free almost. And he's been awesome. So those guys are kind of in a tandem, and that takes away even more opportunities for Tank. Look, man, I still think Tank is an A-plus tailback, and I think if they ever have a game where they feel like they can overpower the defensive front of the other team, they're going to run the ball more, and Tank is going to absolutely truck people. I think he's still there. It's just that they've kind of moved away from it a little bit because they don't have the blocking for it.
Let's talk defense for Auburn. Ole Miss's running game has really been incredible, and it's not just Matt Corral, who's been, in my mind, maybe the Heisman winner based on the way he carries them at times. But they've got 3 backs. They've got Parrish. They've got Ely. They've got Snoop Connor. How does Auburn handle their running attack, and what do you think they can do to kind of limit what Ole Miss has done? Because, frankly, I've been surprised. I thought Ole Miss might sling it 40, 50 times a game. To see the way they run it, which I don't blame them because of how effective they are, it's been a little bit of a shock to see. How do you think Auburn matches up with that?
I like the way Auburn matches up. Corral, man, the way he played in that Tennessee game, and I
Mm-hmm.
think he rushed for 190 in that game, was insane. I'm a Heisman voter, and if I had to vote today, I would definitely vote Matt Corral. He's been tremendous this season, and some people would say, yeah, but Ole Miss isn't going to win the national title. First of all, you don't know that. And second of all, they're not asking me about who's the best player on a good team. They're talking about who's the best player, and Matt Corral's a stud. Yeah, they have a lot of tailbacks, as you mentioned. Ole Miss does. They have kind of one flavor for each kind. They got the big dude, they got the perimeter guy, and then they got the balanced guy. Auburn generally up front has been pretty good against the run. Their defensive ends generally are not very good pass rushers. They're good at holding the line. What I like about Ole Miss and what they do is they play around with their tight end a lot, where they formation him into the backfield or formation him from the backfield out and create an extra gap. That's kind of some of the games they've been playing with some of these teams. They definitely tore up LSU doing that. And I like the way Auburn does things against the run. They have a really good physical safety, a box safety, and Smoke Monday, who I think a lot of. They're going to get Owen Papo back for this game, who's like he can be I think of him as a money backer, but he can play pretty much any of the linebacker positions. He's been out since the Penn State game, and he gives them a little more brute force, at least to fill runs. So I like the way Auburn matches up with Ole Miss's run game. I don't love the way necessarily that Auburn matches up with the passing game, because Matt Corral is a tough guy to mess with. He's a great passer. And although Ole Miss is missing at least one of their really good wideouts, maybe two, I still, they're still pretty good. And Auburn's pass defense is just so-so, primarily because their rush is just so-so.
What do you make of Roger McCreary? Because Pro Football Focus has loved him for 2 years. You don't ever often hear him mentioned. And look, this is a league where you've had phenomenal cornerbacks coming in. You had the two kids at LSU, the guys at State. You had Kyer Elam at Florida. I mean, there's a lot of good DBs in the league, so you can be good and get overshadowed. But PFF has just been over the moon about him for 2 years. Now you're seeing him show up in first-round mock drafts potentially. It seemed like it took the public a while to catch on to him, but what do you make of the season he's having, and how much problem can he give Ole Miss?
He's really good. He's one of the best cornerbacks I've seen at Auburn. I'm not sure he's quite as good as Carlos Rogers, who was back in the mid-2000s, ended up playing for the Redskins for a long time. My thing on Rogers is, first of all, he's a very bright individual, and he just has that like Richard Sherman awareness types. Like when you're talking to him, he just, Richard Sherman from the NFL, he just, I'm always blown away when I see interviews with him, because he's just so bright and articulate with everything he's doing, football, not football. I think Rogers got some of that ability, and I think teams are going to fall in love with him when they're scouting him after this season. NFL teams, they're going to love him. And I think that when you talk about the things he does as a cornerback to disrupt the other team, he's great at it. My issue is that he just doesn't have like those crazy plays where you're like, wow, this guy's a next level player. Like, he's always steady, and I know he's going to make a lot of money in the NFL, but to me, he doesn't have that like Deion Sanders type speed or acceleration. And you just don't necessarily notice him all the time. And I used to notice Carlos Rogers a lot. So I just wonder if that je ne sais quoi element, where it's like, does he do crazy things out there, like good crazy things? Honey Badger did some of that. I know he's not necessarily a cornerback totally by trade, but those kind of guys stuck out. Pat Peterson did that in college too. And I don't necessarily see that from Roger, but he's really good. He's just a steady, good player.
When we talked before the Penn State game, you were a big believer in what Derek Mason had done with their defense. Now that you've seen some tougher games and a variety of results, what do you make of him now?
It's kind of, as Vanderbilt people would know, it's kind of an acquired taste. He does run a lot of zone in this era where people are playing a lot of man. And I think early on in this season, the players were having some difficulty changing that paradigm a little bit. The one thing that I have absolutely noticed about this defense, though, is that it tackles better than it did a year ago. He's had a great effect on that part of it. And I think we're starting to see fewer mental busts because they're more used to what they're doing. They're still running a lot of zone. I have noticed a little more man, particularly in that Arkansas game, and I would expect to see more in the Ole Miss game. But listen, man, this team has some limitations. But defensively, I really like what Derek Mason's done. I still feel the way I did before the Penn State game. And Georgia's really the only team that gouged them. And I mean, geez, it's Georgia. I think he's done a really good job. I think it was a good hire, and I like the direction this defense is going.
Well, their line's been good this year, I think, but not like Auburn's got names and dudes that play in the NFL for a long time throughout its history. I'm very interested to see what he does when their recruiting takes a step up at that position.
Yeah, that's
or
the thing.
Or is that an if?
Yeah, it's an if. For me, it's an if because they're so far behind because half their staff is from Boise, Idaho, and these kids have no idea who Brian Harsin is. I mean, they're getting to know him now. So the 21 class was a buzz because nobody knew who they were. The 22 class is going okay, but they're still having to kind of dig in. I mean, Derek Mason is not. These kids around Southeast know him, but he's 1 out of 11 or whatever. I mean, it's been an uphill battle. So I don't think Auburn's going to start doing good work on the recruiting trail until the 23 class. So that creates kind of a lapse in there, right? They have some players right now. Auburn's defensive front does for sure. My issue is that the second tier guys and even the developmental guys, which I would guess you would call third tier, I don't see them right now. And they're also going to be facing some suspensions for the Ole Miss game. And I think it's going to hit them right there on the defensive line as well.
Who do we expect to be out for Auburn tomorrow, if you can say?
It's just going to be some backup defenders.
Okay.
I think it's going to be 2. And, it's nobody that, like, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're like, oh, my God, they lost 2 backup defensive linemen. Oh, my God, we can't win now. It's not like that. But these guys together probably play, 20, 30, 40 snaps a game. And that's 20, 30, 40 snaps a game that they're going to have to give to some dudes that don't play. So, that's the thing, man. Like when you're playing these smaller teams, like for instance, Auburn played Alabama State and played Akron earlier in the year. If it's first team on first team, Auburn's a better team, but not by a huge mile. It's when you get to the second team guys for Alabama State, for Akron, that's when you start really bludgeoning them. And so that's when I get a little anxious about the Auburn situation. It's when those first team guys have to go the whole damn game because you're going to be playing a true freshman or a walk-on behind them.
Well, look, if things get a little too fast, you can just fall down and fake a cramp right? I mean, not that happens, but it's been alleged.
No, the only sport where anybody fakes anything is soccer. They never do it in basketball. Chris Paul never flops, and I never see it in football, obviously.
Hey, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to hate the question, but I ask it because every time I Google search Auburn football, it comes up. What is the deal with this vaccination situation and Brian Harsin? Because I know you don't think it's a big deal, but just explain to the audience what's going on there.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to discuss his vaccination situation. He doesn't want to say whether he's been vaccinated or not, and he doesn't want to talk about anybody else's vaccination status, whether it be a player or a coach. Which is a position when I first heard about it in June, I was kind of giving you the dog ears on that one, like I didn't understand. But I think the more I think about it, the more I'm at peace with it myself. Just because, I think it's pretty clear that he's got some questions at minimum about the vaccine on a personal level. Now, our people in the inside insist, and players too that we talk to, that he has been pushing vaccination for the kids. So it ain't like he's walking around the complex going, guys, I don't know, man. This vaccine's shady. I wouldn't take it. He is not doing that. He's promoting it. I don't understand why it's such a big deal if he is vaccinated. Now, things took a little bit of a turn a week ago when Auburn announced that all employees, whether that be football coaches or otherwise, have to be vaccinated fully by December 8th. That's when you kind of got a moment of truth there where he's either got to get it done or he faces termination, officially anyway. But in our state, they have all kinds of ways you can get bypasses or I can't remember the word that they use for it, but exemptions, exactly. So when you go in to get a religious exemption, I didn't do this, but we're familiar with some people who have. They don't even really ask. They just say, "What are you here for?" And you say religious exemption, and they go, "Okay, here you go." So the chances, in my view, the chance of him getting fired for this is 0.0. It ain't going to happen because there's so many ways around it. But some people have really locked on to this thing of where he won't discuss his vaccination status. And the more I think about it, the more I think that's just a silly thing to get upset about. I don't know. Just my opinion.
Well, our field loves to write about these things, right? They're such exciting topics. And I really have deep concern about who's been vaccinated and not, right? It's everybody else's business is our business suddenly, right?
Yes. it's just not something that really gets me excited in any way. I don't know. I'm vaccinated. I'm going to
Yeah.
get my booster probably early next week, if not late next week. I mean, that's just where I am. And he's about my age, so if we were
Yeah.
having a conversation and he asked my opinion, I would tell him, hey man, you should probably get vaccinated, but I'm not going to push it. I don't
Yeah.
care. Like, if you want to get vaccinated, get it done, or probably you already have. And if you
Yeah.
don't, fine. It's your risk.
That's what I'm getting at. Why is this? And for anybody who didn't pick up, that was sarcasm. I don't get why this is becoming. I mean, if he doesn't take the vaccine, then so he's the guy that runs the risk, right?
Yeah. And he had COVID during
Yeah.
two-a-days,
Yeah.
and he was fine. And so he's got some natural immunity for sure. I don't necessarily think that's the be all end all for the rest of his life, but he's fine. And I'm not worried about Brian Harson's health. That's his issue. He's not worried about mine.
That was my point. But anyway,
We're also having a big hubbub over here. You probably haven't noticed it, where the people, for whatever reason, Auburn fans have gotten on this kick where we're supposed to call everybody coach. Like, when you get on the Zooms and stuff, you're supposed to call him Coach Harsin. I mean, that's crazy, right?
yes, that is crazy.
I mean, you don't call
but how
Stackhouse
many people
coach.
do it though? That's what I want to know.
Well, to me, when somebody does that, it tells me they're like little Homer dude, right?
Right.
Yeah, which I'm not, and we don't want to be. And I don't know. That's just been a big thing in the Auburn Twitter world lately, and I think it's funny.
Our field is something these days.
It really is, man. I mean, it seemed like in the 90s and before that, you had to really hustle to get in the game, and now it's just a bunch of yahoos. I hate to say a bunch of yahoos because there are definitely some legitimate folks out there, but there's also some illegitimate folks, and it's annoying.
Yeah. Let's talk SEC. I mean, there's a million ways we can go here, but what are the chances Georgia doesn't end up winning this whole thing in the SEC?
Well, I've got them. AWS has them, for me anyway, at a 72.7% chance to win the SEC. I mean, the only chance I think it's going to happen is something weird happens in the championship game, and it's almost has to be Alabama, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're the team best equipped to mess with Georgia, although I have questions about if they can even mess with Georgia. I mean, listen, Auburn people these days are much more worried about Georgia than they are Alabama, because all you have to hear is they're barking and they're hooting and hollering, and they have accomplished nothing since 1980, and yet they're walking around like they've really done something. Alabama, on the other hand, has won 5 or 6 national titles under Saban. So, I mean, they've actually backed up their talk. So from an Auburn perspective, it's kind of tough to see Georgia being so good, but yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to probably win this thing. And
that's an underrated rivalry. I didn't realize how much those teams hated each other until just a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if Georgia feels that way right now, because it seems like they win most of the time against Auburn. But a lot of our folks live in Georgia. There's a whole ton of Auburn people. Auburn's kind of close to the Georgia border anyway, and there's a lot of Auburn people over in that state, and they have to listen to the barking and all the sophomoric BS that those people do. And I mean, again, I was a kid. I'm an old ass man right now whose hair would be gray if I didn't color it. And they haven't won a national title since I was a pup, man. So I don't really see how they have much room to talk at all.
What do you think LSU settles on a head coach? I mean, I don't think any of us know, but man, they are shooting for the moon with that one, that's what Scott Woodward does.
Yeah, they've got. So if they're going to let Orgeron go, and what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? I've learned from past experience at Auburn, which is the home of weird dismissals of coaches, that when you do that, you've got at least a bead on somebody that you want. So to me, I think James Franklin's going to end up at Southern Cal, and so for them, it's going to be something in the neighborhood of Lane Kiffin, is what I was thinking for LSU, and I like him a lot. Yeah, I don't know how he's going to do when all the pressure is on him like that, because I think Lane Kiffin's going to go to either LSU or Miami. It seemed like he'd be better at home at Miami, but I don't know. I got some questions about Lane Kiffin. There's no one thing I don't have a question about is that him and Jeff Lebby are the best play callers in college football right now, and yeah, those guys are studs.
Let me play devil's advocate. Why would you leave Ole Miss for Miami right now with all the stuff with the president allegedly does not like football? Their facilities are not very good. Okay, fair enough.
Who gives a? You talking about Donna Shalala?
No, don't they have a new president?
I don't know. I'm not a Miami expert, but
I'm not either,
Lane Kiffin. First of all, he's made for South Beach, and second of all, he can endear himself to people. He's great like that. He's a very charming individual. And and he's exciting, and he's going to be good. I just think the ACC will be a more fertile area for him than the SEC. Now, I mean, he's done a great work at Ole Miss, but he's got Matt Corral like at the peak of his career right now, and I wonder what would be happening if he had some kind of a subpar quarterback like a lot of SEC teams are dealing with right now, and which he would be dealing with next year if he stayed at Ole Miss. I just think he'd be better off somewhere else in the long run.
I'm sure you saw James Franklin's press conference this week, right?
It was weird, yeah.
He's got to be on his way out the door somewhere.
Gotta
I've
be.
never seen him that unfocused.
Yeah, my friend Dave Jones, that covers the Penn State for the Harrisburg paper, who's been doing it for forever. I'm not trying to rag on him for being old, but he's been doing it a long time. He's just kind of writing about it now as if it's a foregone conclusion. That, like, all right, we'll start thinking about who's going to replace him. So to me, I think Southern Cal works better for him, but there's still some talk about him going to LSU. I don't know, man. I think it's going to be more like Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, well, James is going to get his name out there. He's going to get a raise, or he's going to get one of those primo jobs. I'm with you. I think my gut is he ends up at SC. But let's talk Auburn basketball for just 2 seconds. The last time we talked, Alan Flanagan, I think, had been hurt. I think he's been recovering. Where are they with him?
Right, so he got out of his boot maybe 10 days ago. He's at practice, and he can do some really light stuff, but he can't run still. So the goal all along was to have him ready for like the second half of December to be ready to go, like go. And I think they're on track with that. I think he'll be running probably in a couple weeks. And at that point, it'll just be a matter of building back his fitness and his endurance. And hopefully by the second half of December, he will be able to be inserted into the starting lineup. The SEC is really good this year. I know Vanderbilt's probably not going to have a great year, although they have probably the best single player in the entire league. But yeah, Auburn's going to be really good, but there's a lot of teams that are going to be good. So this should be a really fun season of just duking it out in basketball. It's crazy. Like 10, 11 years ago when Sly was telling everybody, like chastising teams, you've got to invest in basketball. This is a joke. This should not be Kentucky and whoever else. And boy, they took it to heart, didn't they? Because this league has really stepped up.
Where would this league be if it never had Mike Slive?
Boy, he was so good. I don't think people recognize how good he is. And what's crazy is that I really feel like Sankey is the Tim Cook to Mike Slive's Steve Jobs. That's exactly how I see it. Slive was the visionary, and now Sankey just kind of continues on that path, even though I don't think he's a visionary.
Well, I think he stunned all of us with the OU Texas stuff. I think that gave me a respect for him. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I didn't either. But I don't ultimately know how much it's going to help. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like Texas, I feel like they're in the past, and Oklahoma they're good right now. But I mean, see, I'm biased. So I went to high school in Tulsa, and some of my best friends are OU fans, and they've been talking all kinds of smack at me lately about how OU's going to show up in the SEC and it's going to change everything. And then I watched OU last week struggle to beat Kansas, dude. I mean, they had to do everything they could to beat Kansas, who we know sucks. So I'm just like, your defense is not going to get it done in the SEC. I think right now Oklahoma's a middle of the pack SEC team, and I think Texas is down toward the bottom. And I mean, is that really worth worrying about? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, you beat me to it. I don't think. I mean, good Lord, Oklahoma struggled with Kansas. Can you imagine Alabama or Georgia struggling with Kansas? See, that's what I'm with you right there. I don't think Oklahoma, to me, right now is a playoff team. I just don't see it. I mean, heck, did you watch Week 1? They almost got beat by Tulane, Jay. Tulane's awful.
Yeah. They've been saved by their freshman quarterback that they finally started playing in the Texas game when all hope was lost, really, and he's been awesome. One thing that I found funny, though, I was actually at my high school reunion back in Tulsa this past weekend and talking to some OU people face-to-face, people who are normally rational human beings. And they were like, once we get into the SEC, our recruiting is going to take a big step forward because we keep losing all these recruits to the SEC. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why is a kid in Nashville or Birmingham or Atlanta or Miami or Gainesville going to go to Oklahoma to play defense? Are you serious? Like, nobody's going to do that. It's not going to help their recruiting a lot. And I just think they have these delusions of grandeur about what's going to happen when they get in this league, dude. They're going to get knocked around, I promise.
Well, the SEC is kind of sneakily leaned a little bit back towards defense this year for anybody that's really paying attention, which it's taken a leap back, but you look at A&M, the way they're playing. Alabama's down, but they're still pretty good. Auburn's got a good defense, maybe not great. There's Georgia. See, that to me, that's going to be their biggest problem, what you just hit on right there.
You talking about with Oklahoma?
Yes.
Yeah, they don't face any defenses like Georgia. I mean, this Georgia defense is just sick. I bet you they're going to have 8 or 9 of their starters play in the NFL. And, I mean, most of those guys I know because Auburn was trying to get them, and they lost them to Georgia along with lots of other teams. Yeah, defense is going to really mess with Oklahoma because they love taking it. You know, the Big 12, dude, those guys, they don't have the depth, man. Particularly in the run defense has been really, really bad. And I'm telling you, when you think you're just going to run sprint draws against Alabama, dude, and Georgia, it ain't going to happen. I mean, those guys are going to be too fast. So, but again, that's still a few years down the road. It's nice to add some teams because I get kind of bored with Vanderbilt and South Carolina sucking all the time. So maybe this will kind of change it up a little bit. What's going on with Vandy, man? That game last week was pitiful.
It's bad. It's really bad. That is a long rebuild. I mean, and look, that is the place where they specialize in the long rebuild. That is a longer rebuild than the typical Vandy rebuild.
It's a perpetual rebuild.
It's been a 60-year rebuild.
Yeah.
But it is what it is at this point. But I had one more thing for you, and I'm losing my mind here.
It was about Senator Tuberville? Oh, go ahead.
No, it was not. But we could go there if you like. But
okay.
No, I'm good with that too. Okay, your commissioner. I don't think I asked you this last time we had you on. How do you do this new thing with pods or divisions or whatever when OU and Texas join?
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I don't like the pod system. So I think what they ought to do is just go east-west, reorganize it intelligently. Okay, so i.e. take Mizzou out of the East. And put things in their correct geographic setup, and then go to 9 conference games, and let's move forward. If Saban's on board with that, and he is, then I'm on board with it because I trust that guy's opinion on these kinds of things. I mean, I know I'm an Auburn writer, but he's a very bright guy, and I think 9 conference games is the way to go. I know that cuts you down a little bit in terms of you're out of conference latitude, but just deal with it, man. The SEC's where the money is, and just roll with it that way. I think that'd be fun, man. You get Arkansas, Oklahoma going back at it, and that way you can preserve Auburn, Alabama. You can preserve, Auburn, Georgia, and Tennessee and Alabama can keep going in their fake rivalry that Alabama wins every year, and it just makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do wonder if eventually they might not go to 10. Because, when they go to 9, I just wonder what is the revenue that you're going to get on top of that when South Carolina drops the Citadel and Vanderbilt drops UNLV or all the games that have to go to make room for that. I really wonder how that tug of war eventually plays out because you got the league sitting there going, we've got a gold mine for every time we add a league game and take one of those away. And you got coaches sitting there going, hey, job security, right?
Yeah, that's a great point that I was just kind of thinking about that, Chris, because I don't look at it that way as much. If you're at Vanderbilt and you're at South Carolina or you're even at Kentucky most of the time, you need those games against New Mexico State or Colorado State or whatever. You need them to stay afloat so that you don't just get pounded into submission all year long. I don't see that. I don't say that in a bad way. It's just part of life. You need those. Auburn needs them for a different reason. Georgia needs them for a different reason. But you got to keep some of them. So I don't think you can go to 10. I think you got to stay at 9. That way you can have 3, at least, to get yourself situated a little bit. I don't know. There's no perfect answer. I know that adding Oklahoma and Texas is going to add some money to the coffers, and I think that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, of course. Jay, you've been a great guest today. Anything on the league? In addition to being a trophy husband, you've been a great guest. But
well, I'm also a graduate of University of Kentucky, and I think they're going to finish 11-1, which is going to be a great year for them. And it's really cute to see them think that they could push for a national championship. I think it's great. But I'm proud of Kentucky. They're a cute little story.
Now, I thought you were a Transylvania guy. You do.
I graduated from both.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I got a master's at Kentucky, so I can claim whichever one I want to at the time. But I put the time in at UK too.
UK's football is a little better than Transy's right now. So
Yeah, well, Transy hadn't lost since 1944. I'll have you know.
Right.
Got him.
Jay, it's always fun. Tell folks what you guys have got coming up at Auburn Sports, where they can find your work, all that stuff.
Yeah, we got a little website called auburnsports.com. It's part of the Rivals Network that Chris and I share. And I do a show. I like to call it the Drunk Cast on game days when Auburn's playing. About 30 minutes before the game, we get on the air on YouTube. It's called the Brain Drain. I go all the way through the game, and then we do a call-in show as part of the show after the game. We usually go 2 or 3 hours. I'm drinking the whole damn time, and we're just cutting up and having fun. I realize a lot of the people listening to this show may not be fired up about Auburn football, but maybe you come over to the site, to the show on the Brain Drain on YouTube, and see if you might have some fun, because we don't just talk about Auburn. We talk about whatever. And bourbon. If you guys like bourbon, I talk about that a lot too. So check it out.
Well, you were entertaining without bourbon, so Jay with bourbon, I think we need to see.
Hell yes!
All right. He's Jay Tate of auburnsports.com. I'm Chris Lee, host of The 14. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.